Okay, well, a friend of mine got a diagnosis recently, and he's got to cut down his salt intake. And all of the bread he has bought at the grocery store, commercially available bread, that is salt free, is lousy. And it appears to me, I tried some of it. It's lousy for reasons that have nothing to do with the bread, or nothing to do with the salt content, I should say, but just for the bread itself, it's kind of blah. So, one of my partners, she has a very simple, very basic bread recipe that she uses all the time. She's not a regular baker. She gets great results with it. And since my friend is not at least not yet, a regular baker, I was thinking that I would do the same thing. Step one is, this is all going to be measuring this out. I'm going to put a timer on just to show that this doesn't take a long time, and show everybody particularly my friend, what's in it. We're also going to do two things. I'm going to do one full batch with the regular amount of salt, which is 2 teaspoons of salt, which is a lot for a loaf this size. Then I'm going to do one without any at all, and then maybe the day after I'll do a third loaf with reduced salt and maybe some other sneaky tricks I have up my sleeve. Now I'm going to go ahead. So just so we know here, we need 3 cups of all-purpose flour. We need 2 teaspoons of salt, which is a lot, but we're going to start with that, and on the first loaf, and then we're going to do a teaspoon of yeast. Optionally, you can add a bit of sugar. 1.5 cups of warm water. Okay, this is going to be an overnight rise, so it doesn't have to be, perfect. So I'm going to go now to this thing here, and I'm going to get our clock going, and we're going to start with a stopwatch here. And when I say go, we're going to combine all these ingredients, and we'll see precisely how long it takes me to get all this stuff in a bowl and prepared. And honestly, I don't expect it will take long. For those of you who prefer to weigh your flour, and I weigh my flour, I don't weigh everything. I do some things by volume, but flour is one of those things where, you want to be one of the cool kids who weigh everything now, because depending on how you pour it or how you pack it or whatever, you can fit different weights into the 3-cup volume. And you really don't want to be in a position where you're like guessing. But I'm doing this the way it's set in the recipe here, okay? So that we can have authenticity, showing how easy it is. Most people cook by volume in the United States, so there we go. This is a little more than 3. I'm going to take another spoonful out here and shake it. And to me, that looks about 3. I might add a smidgen extra water to my 1.5. Okay, that's it. That's all the flour that this thing takes. For those of you who are playing along at home and want to make this recipe but would rather weigh it out, a good rule of thumb is that a cup of all-purpose flour weighs about 125 grams. So if you wanted to say weigh out 375 grams, más o menos, then you would probably be in a good spot. Okay, we need 2 teaspoons of this salt here. And again, this is a lot. I think this is a lot, but we'll see here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. 1, 2. Okay, and a teaspoon of yeast. I'm using my active dry yeast. Yes, I buy it in bulk, or buy it by the pound rather, because I'm a regular baker. An excellent baker, but a regular baker. So here we go. That is that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and whisk these ingredients together really quickly. Whisk the dry ingredients together, get them dispersed and mixed, so that when the water goes in, you're not just, all the yeast or salt or whatever doesn't clump in the same spot. This is probably unnecessary. By the time you get done stirring things together, you've already done this job, but makes me feel better, psychological, and it also is a handicap for the time involved in our effort today. Okay, just added a little extra time to my score. Heaven forfend. Now, next and last thing we're going to get before we start mixing this crapola, 1.5 cups of water. 1.5 cups of water, sort of warm, not hot, So sort of room temperature, because this is going to be, this is going to rise overnight, okay? So let me see here. Just checking out my thing. As I had a smidgen extra, I'm going to take a little splash extra water to go so the dough hydrates properly. That's beautiful. So that's about 1.5 cups, más o menos, a little extra in it. Mix it together. Of course, what are we going to use? We're going to use my stand mixer. I stand here and I mix it. And we're just going to mix it together. I'm also going to put this in another bowl. Reason being is that I'm going to make the salt-free tonight so that I have both loaves in the morning to compare. However, because I only have one Dutch oven and this is a Dutch oven recipe, I can't cook them both in the Dutch oven at the same time. So I'm going to make the other one just like this, minus the salt, in about 2 hours. So, and then let it rise. And then we'll put these in tomorrow. Same 12-hour rise, same hour table rise, etc. As per the recipe, and then we'll make it work, okay? And guess what? Look, weighing ingredients out and mixing the dough pretty much to the point where we would just go ahead and let it rise on the counter. 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So it's not a time-consuming process. So those of you who are intimidated by baking, oh my God, it takes so much time. Most of baking is waiting for things to rise. So, waiting for things to bake. A lot of the stuff that you do, you know, there might be some skill or finesse in what you do, but for the most part, you're just waiting for shit to bake, waiting for shit to rise. Okay, this is going to be my bowl for, I've been using a while. I'm going to rinse this out really good and dry it out. So just so you know, gray bowl will be for the salted loaf, okay? And I don't want it dry inside. I don't want it too sticky, because that moisture can affect it. Seems like maybe it's not a lot, but it can. Okay. There we go. Any dusties or chunkies that were in there are out. So now, I'm going to take this critter right here, and this is the salted loaf. Get my rubber spatula, get all the extra dough off of here. I don't know how much time this is adding to the process here. Shouldn't have stopped the clock, but had I not changed bowls, at the point where I stopped the clock would have been the point where I would have done what I'm about to do right now. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment. So what you see here, that's the dough. That's going to be our loaf. That's just going to sit around. It's going to rise for 12 hours, okay? And then tomorrow, we're going to put it in a Dutch oven. And we're going to bake it. And the process of forming a loaf out of it will also be fairly simple. This is not a complicated recipe. And, you know, I've never made it before, but I've made recipes similar to this before. And yeah, it's making bread is not a complicated process. If you've done it, you know, once you've done it a few times, you get over the whole notion of like, oh God, I'm baking bread. That's a lot of work. Not really. Unless you're making like a professional baker and you're making loaves for the entire neighborhood or some shit. Okay, so that is that. Here we go. Let that sit. I'm gonna toss one of my ragged ass old kitchen towels on top. And here we go. Alexa, set a timer for 12 hours.
12 hours. Starting now.
That's gonna be it. So I'm gonna sit in the oven here, and the gray bowl will have our salted dough. So in a couple more hours, be back here, make the exact same recipe with no salt. So we have something to compare it to tomorrow. Okay, we're going to do the no salt version of this. As some of you all right remember a David Letterman segment from back in the day called Beat the Clock. And he would start a clock, and the Saber Dance would play. You know, Paul Schaefer and the World's Most Dangerous Band would play the Saber Dance or something like that. And he would find somebody on the street or in a local establishment say, beat the clock. You have to beat the clock. And he wouldn't tell them what they had to do to beat the clock. He'd just start a clock running, and they'd sit there staring at the wall for 60 seconds, not sure what they were supposed to do. And none of them beat the clock, to my recollection, because nobody actually said, what am I supposed to do in the time allotted? Well, isn't that interesting? What we're going to do right now is we're going to make the same thing we made about 2 hours ago with without the benefit of flour, or without the benefit of salt, okay? This is going to be, first one was our control. This is going to be our oh, hang on here. Let's not get too, okay. First one was going to be our control. This is going to be our salt-free version to see if this tastes any strange or is any way inferior, or if it doesn't rise properly or any reason. Okay. And I'm also going to do the timer, just to be sure. So here we go. Bang. All right. Now, 3 cups of flour. This, we're doing it mostly by volume. You know, we feel we have added too much, we'll scoop a little off the top. If we feel we've added too little, we will, hey look, add a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Okay. And my typical way of doing this is to add a little too much and then take some off the top. Seem to get closer to the actual limit that way. Okay. It looks like about 3 cups, you know, if we're paying attention. So there we go. That's that. That's the flour. That's all we need for that. So we'll take this this now significantly less full bag of multi-purpose flour, all-purpose flour. Multi-purpose flour would be interesting. A teaspoon of yeast. No teaspoons of salt. Okay. There we go. Teaspoon of yeast. And again, we whisk it. Now, no salt to add. So, this is this. Now, in that gray plastic bowl earlier, we put the dough with the salt. We're also going to put a little salt on top of it tomorrow. A little salt on the crust before it bakes. This, no such thing. This is just bread without salt. Great experiment. We're going to see if it works. If it tastes weird or funny or bland. And then on day 2, our plan will be do a lower sodium version of this. Okay, so now I'm going to need a cup and a half más o menos of room temperature water. And I'm letting the water run a little bit so that it comes closer, because this is still a little chilly. And this longer wait on water is probably cutting into my time. I'm a little disappointed, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, now it's coming up to something close to room temperature. There we go. And looks like about a cup and a half. Touch on. That's about right. Here we go. And what do we do? What do we need? We need the stand mixer. For those of us who stand. And we're going to mix it together. And Try to, as we do this, scrape the flour off the sides and bring this together in a nice and pretty package. Probably the most precise experiment that I've ever done or you'll ever have seen on a baking video. I am not Adam Ragusea. But sure enough, there we go. Minus the salt, 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Hey, what do you do, right? Our spatula. Got the little bits off here. If I were being really fussy, as I sometimes am, what I would do right now is I would be really thorough in my approach to mixing and rub the dough on the side to get all this little crusty semi-hydrated dough off it, but it's not going to matter. Okay, this is our no salt version right here, and to be consistent with method, we're going to cover it in plastic wrap. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Okay. Notice that the cling film does stick to this a little bit better than the other one. Then let's see if we can find some other ragged ass kitchen towel I've had or the family has had, to be more precise, for decades, probably since the Reagan administration. And there we go. That's going to be what we have for, we're going to have another timer on this one for 12 hours, and it's going to go 2 hours after the original. And then we'll take the two of them tomorrow after both are baked and compare them for flavor, texture, rise, etc. All right, see you tomorrow. Good morning, world. It's about 12 hours later, and we're going to take a look at the dough. Remember the dough we made last night? All right, this is the regular one. It's got the salt in it, okay? So, saving that. This, if you can see what it looks like, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take spatula. I'm also going to take a little bit of flour. I'm going to let this, I'm going to form the loaf here, okay? Might even use a little more flour. And this is also another one of those things. This is a no-knead recipe, okay? I see a lot of no-knead recipes, and no-knead recipes are fantastic. I'm not knocking them, but kneading dough is not such an arduous task that one should be afraid of it. I mean, it's basically just mushing it around and mixing it and stretching it so that it develops gluten. Well, in this case, the development of the gluten occurs because of the length of the rise, because of the amount of time that we put into it. If you don't have 12 hours to wait for a loaf of bread to rise, or your dough to rise, and develop gluten, then you knead it. End of report, right? Okay, that's just how that works. And I'm also going to, this is when we really need the cooking spray. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm just going to turn it around here, so you'll see this a lot. And just, roll it into a little bowl like this. And you can form this in any number of ways. We're doing this in the Dutch oven, so we want it to be predominantly round, okay? that's really what we're going for. And I pick up all the loose flour. No waste in the kitchen. Okay, that's it. That's your loaf of bread right there. Again, should have put a timer on it. And also, let's remember this is the loaf that is has the salt in it. This is the salted loaf. Okay, so it's now the recipe recommends you flour the bottom of the pan and just drop it directly in the bottom of the pan. I have a better idea. Parchment paper has been invented. I like using parchment paper. So parchment paper, we're just going to pick it up on the parchment paper and put it in the Dutch oven on the parchment paper when the time comes. This also makes it easy because then you don't have to. You can lift the parchment paper in and out. You don't have to handle the dough directly when it's at its mushiest and most sensitive. Try to get a roughly square piece of parchment paper, put it roughly in the middle, and then that's where these guys come in again. And now if you just lay the plastic wrap on top of this stuff, it's going to stick, right? So you need to give it a little lubrication. You can either do that in one of two ways, by adding flour or by adding a little bit of oil. I like to add the oil, as you have just observed. You don't need to use the plastic wrap. I like using the plastic wrap because I use it over twice. That's overkill. That doesn't help any. Just laying it on top of other plastic, but whatever. Okay, so that's it. Now, this is where we're at here. And that's loaf number one. And guess what? We've got a loaf. This is going to have to rise for an hour. I'm going to toss the towel over it again gently. And we'll see you in an hour. We're going to make this happen. Okay, I'm going to recap where we're at here. We had the hour table rise, and look at that, it's expanded quite a bit. It's a very wet dough, so it did not get much vertical, but we're going to work on, we got a trick to give it a bit more rise. We've preheated the oven to 450. I have put on the bottom of the oven a shallow baking pan of water, which is going to add to what we call oven rise, oven spring, and I'll go more into detail on that. I've also preheated the Dutch oven. Now they say put it in here for at least half an hour. I don't know how how fast your ovens rise, but my oven doesn't rise that quickly. There you go. That's the Dutch oven. That's what we're baking it in. Okay, and I have down here on top of my bamboo countertop, I have a cutting board with a towel on top, and I'll tell you why I did that in a minute. Okay. So now you can see, given the size and sort of the amorphousness of this loaf here, why I put it on the parchment paper. Because it's going to be a lot easier to put into the Dutch oven like this. Now, all right, this is the salt one, so we're going to do the salts thing. We're going to top it with salt. I don't have sea salt. Honestly, I don't even have a salt shaker. I usually just use seasoned salt and shake it right out of the seasoned salt shaker. All geared for cooking, not geared for entertaining. So this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to put the salt on top. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to score it with a razor. What this is going to do, in theory and in practice, is open up the dough so that it can rise. Okay, so now with our loaf here, we lower it into the Dutch oven. Like that. I'm going to cover it. And then, once again, place it in the oven. We're going to bake it for a half an hour covered, and then 15 to 20 minutes after that uncovered. So, Alexa, set a timer for a half an hour.
Second timer. Starting now.
So you can see right here, it's like when you pull a Dutch oven out of an oven and set it down on a bamboo countertop, you get a little extra decoration to your countertop. That's why I always put a towel down on top of a cutting board that I'm not too concerned about its aesthetics. So yeah, so now I have permanently improved the look of my bamboo countertop, if we want to look at it that way. Okay, so there we go. That's in there. So the water pan at the bottom is not going to do much right now, but it's in there and it's boiling and steaming. When we remove the lid from the top of the Dutch oven, the water pan will increase oven rise and also enhance the crisping and browning of the crust. Okay, so there we go. That's that, and we'll be back in a bit. Okay, we got a traffic issue here. Our first loaf is due to come out of the oven in just a couple minutes, and our second loaf is ready to actually form into a loaf. Second loaf being the one that has no salt. So what I'm going to do really quickly is do all the stuff you saw me do earlier, but we're going to need room on the bamboo countertop for both. Okay, so here we go. There's that. You might recognize last night's dough, a very wet dough recipe, which is okay by me. All right, give me this right here. Oh, this is stickier. I don't know if that's just maybe me not getting the balance of the flour and the water is just right, or if it's just a feature of the salt. But it's my first thing I know. This is more of a challenge, really. Okay, now a couple more Scoopy Doopies out here. All right, that's that. So this is the salt-free. We're not going to salt it like we salted the other one. It was a salted peanut. Yeah, okay, here we go. Now, that's really there. I like to seal up the butt. It's a little improvement there. Okay. It's loaf number 2. And once again, Alexa, stop. That means it's time for us to pull the first loaf out of the oven. All right, and that's a great idea. But first, we're gonna get this thing. There's a little bit of crap over there. It's gone. I don't know what it was. It's gone. Okay. Now, let me tell you, the oven's hot. Okay. It's hard to handle this stuff. Okay, that's that. I'll go. Alexa, set a timer for 1 hour.
1 hour. Starting now.
And then the next one will be the bread. that looks pretty darn good. I think it was successful. So, let me do a little moving around of the items here. Tell you what I'm going to do. This needs to cool. I'll just give you one really clear look at what's inside the Dutch oven. That's your bread, right there. That's not bad looking. That's a pretty good looking loaf of bread. And as you notice, there wasn't a whole lot of time and effort put into that, you know? Okay, so that's got about an hour to go. And I'm gonna turn off the oven for a bit, and we'll preheat it again when the time is right. Okay, well, I've noticed one thing already. Of course, it's much larger. Got much more of an expansion here. I wouldn't say rise. Again, it's not vertical. However, as a baker, you will learn that, gee whiz, this is kind of super wet dough. Super wet. That's why it's another reason why it's vertical. Is that salt inhibits yeast. So when you're making a no salt loaf, and this is going to be so weird. Okay, I'm just gonna. This is a weird thing. I hope it gets good oven spring because this is weird. That you're gonna get, you're gonna get more of a rise. The less salt you use, and well, this thing has got a lot to go. All right, so we're gonna top this off here with our lid. It's going in for 30 minutes like last time, and then 20 minutes. The lid off. Okay, pretty tight. Okay, here we go. Got the water down there going again. And see you in a half an hour. Okay, so now we're gonna pull out the no salt loaf. I have actually I took the lid off at the halfway mark here. I want to show you something here. This thing is spread out quite a bit. I don't know if the dough is wetter. I don't know if I made a mistake or something. We're gonna let that cool. I mean, it looks like very edible bread. I'm not saying it's lousy, but it certainly doesn't have the lift and body of its salty compatriot. So, gonna let that cool, and then maybe once we get all that done, we will have our first salt versus no salt taste test. Same recipe, only difference, salt. Now it's time for our taste test. On the left, we have the salted loaf. On the right, we have the no salt loaf. And the no salt loaf looks like it doesn't have the same structure. I don't know if that's owed to the salt, but it did seem to get a good enough rise. I got a little bit of water there as palate cleanser. And there we go. So now, salt versus no salt. Step one. I mean, except for the darker finish on that, they look very similar. Here's the salt one. That is a good tasting loaf of bread. Strong plain white loaf. I'm getting the salt. I think a lot of that is because the recipe called for us to salt the crust a little bit. Okay. Palate cleanser. As soon as we chew. Okay, here's the no salt loaf. You definitely notice the absence of salt. There is a bit of blandness there, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Now, whether or not its overall shape here, it being flatter and a little less robust than its salty brother here, is to be decided. But yeah, especially in the aftertaste, the sort of blandness comes through. So this loaf here is basically entirely dependent on what you put on it, and this loaf here is got a lot more going for it. Now, one more test. It's the butter test. Kind of butter each. See, I have salted butter, but I have it all warmed up here pretty good, so I didn't. So it spreads nicely, easily. We're not struggling with it. Okay, so now salted loaf, salted butter. Tastes great. Who doesn't love fresh bread with butter on it, right? No salt loaf, salted butter. But wait. A palate cleanser. And that tastes lovely too. I will say this, there's something about the crust to this. It's a little crunchier, almost cracker-like compared to this. This is much more like regular bread. So both of them are very nice. This, of course, is depending on what you put on it. You know, you can come up with that yourself. But it's a perfectly good loaf of bread for most purposes, as long as you're putting stuff on it. And it's better than the store-bought stuff with no salt in it. This right here is just a really good all-around loaf of bread. Straightforward, tasty, good stuff. So, not today, but since I've got a lot of bread to eat here, very soon I'm going to do an experimental low-sodium loaf with other tricks and ideas. But yes, this no-sodium loaf is tasty. It's got a good crumb. Not so very different from the crumb of the original loaf. Made with all-purpose flour, what most people have in their kitchens anyway. That's the story. And see you next time for round 3 of this recipe with some new twists on it.